The frost hadn't yet melted off the morning grass when the first officer found her. Laken Riley, bright, compassionate, full of life, was slumped in the trees near the Intramural fields, blood oozing into the cold ground. 11 minutes. That's all it took from when the hunt began to when the dread became real. Her friend's frantic calls had gone unanswered. Her AirPod lay abandoned on the trail. Her final heartbeat was recorded at 9:28 a.m. By lunchtime, her life was ended, and the idyllic town of Athens, Georgia, would never be the same. Because there in those woods, hiding unseen, was the man who had been watching her, waiting for the ideal opportunity to strike. And he wasn't finished attempting to find his next victim. Before you step any further into the mystery, take a moment. If you crave stories that challenge the status quo, stir up your deepest emotions, and make you question what you thought you knew, then this is the place for you. Smash that like button to show your support, and hit subscribe to join our family of truth seekers. Every like, every subscribe fuels our passion to uncover the stories that matter and share them with you in high-stakes, high-definition detail. Stay connected, tap that bell icon, too. Be the first to know when our next heart-pounding chapter drops. The February morning was crisp and beautiful, one of those rare Georgia days where the cold bites at your skin but the sky stretches wide and blue overhead. Laken Riley laced up her sneakers, pulled her blonde hair into a loose ponytail, and left her off-campus residence near the University of Georgia with a smile. It was simply another run, a path she'd taken hundreds of times through the familiar woods and fields beyond the Intramural grounds. But that day, February 22nd, 2024, would not end like the others. Hours later, Laken's pals would be frantically scrolling their phones, staring at her immovable on the Find My Pals app. Her location hadn't altered in over an hour. Texts went unanswered. Calls rang until voicemail picked up with unnerving indifference. An unsettling dread permeated through their abode. At 11:30 a.m., no longer wanting to wait, her roommates bundled up and started off toward the woodland trails. They retraced her customary running path with mounting terror tugging at their chests. When they found one of her AirPods dumped in the soil at the trailhead, cold, silent, forgotten, the air seemed to narrow around them. This wasn't just a delay. Something was wrong. Their hands trembling, they dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Our roommate, she went for a run, and we found her AirPod. She's not answering. Please, something's wrong. Within minutes, police cars and university security units rushed on the area. Officer Kenneth Maxwell, a veteran of the University of Georgia Police, led a team through the deep woods. His boots crunched on frozen leaves. His breath curled in front of him. He scoured the trees, calling Laken's name into the eerie quiet. And then, just 11 minutes later, he saw it. A flash of dark among the dense underbrush. A body. Maxwell approached gently, heart beating between his ribs. He called out to her. No response. Kneeling, he searched for a pulse he already knew he wouldn't find. The girl on the ground was still. Blood splattered the adjacent rocks. Her phone lay damaged and abandoned a few feet away. Laken Riley, adored daughter, nursing student, lively friend, was gone. Within the hour, yellow crime scene tape threaded across the woods, locking sadness and dread inside. Her pals, waiting impatiently for news, were gently escorted away by officers, only to have their hopes broken into bits too small to assemble. The news circulated rapidly across Athens. A girl had been slain in broad daylight. On campus. While jogging. Panic replaced disbelief. If Laken Riley wasn't safe here, who was? But tragedy wasn't the only thing detectives found. It didn't take long before a disturbing witness statement surfaced. Another female jogger had passed a man by the lake that same morning, a man wearing a navy jacket, black gloves, and a hood drawn tight over his head. He hadn't looked up. Hadn't moved. Just stood there, staring at his phone like a predator waiting for his opportunity. Detectives instantly collected security footage from the neighborhood, and what they found sent chills down their spines. In the early morning hours, cameras had captured a dark figure strolling through the student apartments, pacing and loitering. The same man had even tried to break into a nearby student flat, rattling the door of a young woman who had been inside, showering, before running when she recognized him. Hours later, Laken was dead. The puzzle pieces were stacking up, quickly and ugly. By that evening, as campus spotlights scanned across the darkening woods and officers scoured through student dorms, a surprising discovery was made. With a rusted green dumpster behind the apartment complex, an officer found a black jacket soaked with blood, with strands of long, dark hair coiled around one of the buttons. Just a few feet away, buried in a shrub, a pair of gloves lay stained crimson red. DNA testing would later confirm the darkest fears. The blood belonged to Laken. The hair was hers. Ring camera footage from a nearby residence recorded the guy, the same hooded man, putting the jacket into the dumpster. Just 15 minutes after Laken's smartwatch reported her final heartbeat. But the most essential issue still remained: who was he? And was he still out there, watching, waiting to attack again? The hazy surveillance photographs spilt across every news station in Athens that night. A hooded figure in black attire, a gray sling bag draped over his shoulder, disappearing beyond the student apartments. Somewhere in the frigid darkness, Laken Riley's killer was still wandering free, and cops knew every minute counted. At police headquarters, detectives swarmed around monitors, rewinding and replaying the film. They examined his walk, his size, the way he moved. There was something almost casual about it, like a man putting out the trash, not a killer disposing of damning evidence. Then the first significant break. A second Ring doorbell camera captured another angle. It shows the same man, just minutes later, returning to the dumpster, this time carrying a plastic bag. When detectives retrieved the area, they found fresh evidence buried in the neighboring brush. A pair of bleeding gloves, hastily abandoned. Both the jacket and the gloves were rushed to the forensics lab. The results came back faster than everyone expected. The blood? Laken's. The hair tangled in the jacket's button? Laken's. The killer hadn't merely slipped away unobserved, he had left his trail wide open for anyone desperate enough to follow. Now, investigators needed a name. They issued a bolo, "Be on the lookout," across Athens. Photos from the dumpster CCTV film were leaked to the public. A black Adidas cap. Dark jacket. Gray sling bag. The hope was that someone, somewhere, would identify him. They didn't have to wait long. By the next morning, tips rushed in. And one name surfaced again and again: Jose Antonio Ibarra. He wasn't just a random stranger. He lived right there, at the AU-like apartment complex, mere steps from where Laken's body had been found, steps from the garbage where her bloodstained things had been discarded. Officers wasted no time. That afternoon, they knocked on his apartment door. At first, no one answered. Peering through a window, they spied Jose, asleep on a mattress on the floor. His brother Diego lingered nearby. Neither seemed in a hurry to move. When officers eventually entered, the discomfort in the room was thick enough to taste. Neither brother spoke fluent English, so a Spanish-speaking cop was called in. As the translation began, detectives' eyes traveled over Jose carefully. His arms, wrists, and even his neck were scratched, deep, painful wounds that hadn't even scabbed over yet. Some were still oozing. When asked, Jose offered a lame excuse: the cold air, scratched skin. But officers weren't buying it. Not when the wounds matched exactly what you'd anticipate from a violent struggle, from a victim urgently fighting back. And then there came Diego, wearing a familiar item that made the detective's heart spike. The black Adidas cap. The same one worn by the man in the dumpster footage. The parts were slotting together, fast and ugly. Officers asked Jose's ID. His green card had 2 conflicting birth dates, a huge red flag for forgery. There was enough. They apprehended Jose Antonio Ibarra on the scene, handcuffing him while he scarcely resisted. But behind the arrest lie deeper, darker questions. Who was Jose Antonio Ibarra? How did he end himself here? And what hidden threats had followed him into that modest college town? As investigators probed into his past, what they found made their stomachs turn. The farther investigators probed into Jose Antonio Ibarra's past, the darker the image grew. He wasn't a ghost who had merely floated into Athens unnoticed. He was a ticking time bomb that had been discreetly overlooked. Records showed that Jose had sneaked into the United States illegally through El Paso, Texas, in September 2022. Federal agents held him momentarily, but astonishingly, he was let into the nation for an asylum hearing he would never attend. From Texas, he made his way north, eventually landing at a migrant shelter in New York. But he didn't stay out of trouble there either. In September 2023, he was arrested in New York City, accused with hurting a juvenile and a motor vehicle infraction. Still, he wasn't deported. A few months later, in Georgia, Jose and his brother Diego were jailed again, this time found shoplifting from a local Walmart. Again, they were released. Again, no major effects. By December 2023, just 2 months before Laken's murder, a bench warrant was issued for Jose after he failed to show up in court for his shoplifting case. No one picked him up. No one sounded the alarm. He disappeared into the background until it was too late. When detectives pieced together this timetable, a somber understanding settled over the department. Laken Riley's killing wasn't just the work of one individual, it was the failure of an entire system. In the weeks that followed Jose's imprisonment, Athens became a city wrapped in sadness. Vigils were conducted on college lawns beneath starless sky. Candles flared against the cold breeze. Students, teachers, parents, they stood shoulder to shoulder, trembling not from the weather, but from the frightening awareness that someone so dangerous had strolled among them, unobserved. At trial, prosecutors put out the mountain of evidence against Jose. Surveillance footage showed him roaming the woods. The jacket and gloves saturated with Laken's blood. The desperate, broken 911 call Laken had tried to make in her final minutes. DNA linking him unmistakably to the crime. Jose sat unmoved as the evidence accumulated, as testimony from Laken's friends and relatives cracked the courtroom's walls with pain. There was no last-minute twist. No startling reveal. Just the simple, awful truth: a beautiful life was stolen because no one stopped a monster when they had the chance. The jury deliberated for less than a day. The verdict: guilty on all counts. Justice, at least, had been served. But as Laken's parents grabbed each other in the courtroom, tears carving deep lines down their faces, it was achingly clear justice wasn't enough. It wouldn't bring their daughter back. It wouldn't rewind the morning when Laken had grinned and laced up her shoes, assuming she was safe. It wouldn't mend a system that had cracked so wide a predator slipped through. Laken Riley's legacy now lingers over the University of Georgia, in the silence of the trails where she once roamed free, and the blank smile of students who jog a bit closer together now, who peek over their shoulders more often than they used to. Her narrative became a rallying cry, a name recited in prayers, yelled in marches, inscribed into memorial scholarships. But in the stillness after the decision, troubling concerns remain.
Subscribe to our channel to get more videos.
How many warning signals does it take before someone acts? How many times do we unleash danger back into the world before it costs another life? And who will be the next Laken Riley if nothing changes?